Hello and welcome back to Providence PPM. The video today is going to go through the detailed setup of a project. So in our last video we created the project through our portfolio demand process. We also showed how to do a manual project creation in the event that you want to skip that workflow process and you just want to dive right in. Today we're going to go through actually setting up all of the metadata within the project. We'll go through each page and fill in some demo data just so that you can get an idea of the kinds of things that you can do. And we'll just walk through a full project and make sure that everybody knows how to use the project pages and how it can be used for detailed project planning and project management. So let's go ahead and sign in. I'm going to use single sign-on again. All right. So we are back to our project list and our demo business unit that we've set up in our previous videos. So let's jump into this new product this new product development project that we created. So we have our project details page here. We can see the project is active. We assigned our owner last time. We currently are set up for a waterfall methodology for planning, and we're going to be pulling our budget information from the resource allocation page. I will show the differences in this video for those different rules. For now, let's go ahead and just add a few details here to these fields. So for scope, we're just going to go ahead and clarify what's in and out of scope, and I'm just going to copy in some stuff that I've already got pasted here in another document. This is a rich text field, so you can format this however you'd like. You don't have to use the rich text if you don't like to, but I find that it is helpful to kind of format things that way just so it's very clear what's in, what's out. So for assumptions, we'll just be putting a few assumptions in here. And again, this is just demo data, so feel free to put whatever level of information in here you'd like. Obviously, the more descriptive you can be about the scope and about the assumptions, the better. For project constraints, same thing. I'll just copy in a couple things I've got here on another document, just so we've got some data that we can go through. And then we've still got our completion definition from the portfolio intake and portfolio demand processes that was carried over when we approved the project. We've already set up our project team last time, so that will just stay as it is. Again, you can always add a team member if there's somebody else that you need to join the team by clicking that Add Team Member button and picking their role first. Are they a sponsor? Are they a core team member? Are they extended team member? Are they planning only? And you can get them added very easily to the team. Same thing with project stakeholders if you have to add more stakeholders. And then you just click Save Project Details to make sure that you save off everything that we've added above. And that button is both at the bottom of the page as well as the top of the page, just to make it easy to save at any time. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into our project schedule. So right now, as I said, we're set up with a waterfall format. So this means that we're just using a standard Gantt. This page is very, very powerful. It has a lot of different things that you can do with it. We'll just add a task here. I'll just show you the manual creation process for adding tasks, and then I'll show you some of the other automation that exists here. So we'll just do, development task 1. And this is a task. It's got a duration. Let's call it 5 days. It's the first task, so there's no predecessors. We'll go ahead and assign our test user as the owner. And we don't have to set an allocation percentage right now. If we don't want to, we can leave it at 100% since our resource allocation for analytics is being pulled from our resource allocation page. However, if you do want to do line by line allocation, you can certainly do that. So just for demonstration purposes, I will show that. So let's say that we know that for this task, they're going to be on it for 30% of their time. So we'll just put 30%, and we can click Save. And you can see it's got the information that we just entered, and these columns are all adjustable, as well as this overall Gantt field. So you can see that this is our actual Gantt chart. So this will show everything as we get it populated here. Let's go ahead and add another task. And what I'm going to do this time is I'm just going to show the roll-up, the parent task functionality. So we'll just call this parent task, and I'm going to set it as a project. just so that the program knows that this is a roll-up task. And I'm going to go ahead and click Save. And then what I'll do here, and you see already it changes the visual. Now you don't need to do this that way. You could just leave it as a task, and if you end up putting a child task underneath it, it will automatically change it. But it's cleaner to do it this way. So then what you want to do is you just click this little plus sign right here over on the right, and this will add a child task. And we'll just make this 4 days. And let's go ahead and set the predecessor as the first one. So we'll just go ahead and type in a 1 there. And we'll put Jacob Taylor on this one, and I'll set him to 40%. Save. And you can see here that it automatically does the scheduling here with the finish to start relationship. And you can see that it is a child of this roll-up task here. So if I add another task underneath it, and you always want to use the plus sign underneath the parent task to add additional tasks. If you put one under here, it will make it a child of this third task, of this child task that we made. So we want to make sure that we're adding the plus sign on the parent line. So we'll just do this. We'll do child task 2. And we can set the predecessor to line 3. And then we'll just make this, let's call it 7 days. And we'll put, you can put many users if you want to on this. You can do, let's say, Miranda and Liara, and you can even set their individual allocations. So let's call Miranda 20% on this task, and Liara is 40%. So we can go ahead and click Save there. And then if I go, you can see that it automatically adjusts the duration of the parent to account for both of the children. So it's just a nice visual indicator of kind of what that overall duration for that set of tasks looks like under that roll-up, and you can always roll this up just to make it easier for viewing. So works very, very similar to MS Project if you've ever used MS Project. And then once you're done, you're going to go ahead and click Save Changes. I'm not going to do that at this moment just because I want to clear this out so that I can show the import functionality from MS Project. Not that you couldn't do it afterward after making manual changes. I just want to make it kind of clean. So I'm going to go ahead and navigate away from the page and not save my changes. And from here, what I'm actually going to do first, because I personally prefer using MS Project to create my schedules, that's just what I'm most comfortable with, and I find that it's, especially for very large Gantt, it's a much quicker, easier way than doing kind of this manual process. So I'm going to go ahead and export here to MS Project. It exports as an XML file, but we can just save it as an MPP once we have it. So we see the little toasts there saying that it's exporting and that was successfully exported. So we'll go ahead and just open this up in MS Project. And we'll open it as a new project. So the nice thing here is because we already set up our team members in the system, we can see that our resource names are already populated with our team members. So it makes it really easy to go ahead and just build your schedule in MS Project for re-import into the system. Again, you can build all this directly in the system. I just personally prefer using MS Project as a tool, particularly for very large schedules. So what I'm going to do just to save some time, though, is I've already got a schedule created. I'm going to go ahead and copy that one. So let's go ahead and just come over here and copy all this information. And I will just paste it here. All right, so I've got all these set up, and then I can come in here and just go ahead and assign some resources. So I'll just do my test user. I'll do Liara. I'll do Miranda. And I can do as many of these as I want, just like I normally would. So I'm going to go ahead and save this here. All right, so it's saved as a MPP file now, so I can go ahead and close it. And then I'll come back here and I'll go import MPP. And I will just pick this. And you see it's here, and I just click upload. See it's importing it. And there we go. We've got our schedule, and it's already got all the names, it's got already the work hours, everything that we had put in there. Now, I didn't specify utilization in that, so it just defaults to 100%. You can go in and change that if you'd like, but I'm going to go ahead and save changes. And changes saved successfully. You see the little toast. So here we are. And I'm just refreshing the page just for my own sanity. You don't need to. I just tend to like to do that. So we see everything that we have created in our MS project schedule available here, set up already just as it was when we were doing it manually. So like I said, just save some time doing it this way using MS Project. Again, that's what I prefer. You don't have to, but you certainly can. You can also import from Excel if you'd like to get your schedule set up in Excel. If you don't have MS Project, or maybe just not comfortable with it. So lots of different ways to do this. So just going to point out some of the other functions on this page now that we've imported our schedule. So up here we can still add tasks manually if we'd like. We can build from template. I typically don't do this if I've already built a schedule out. This is if I'm starting from scratch. You certainly can if there's template tasks that you'd like to add. Generally what it'll do, it'll append it to the end of your schedule. So just be aware of that if you try to do that after you have already saved a schedule. I can click my Show Critical Path button, and this will just show me all the tasks in the schedule that are critical. Obviously this one being very simple, they're all critical. But for larger schedules, it's just helpful to be able to do that just like you would in MS Project or some other tools that you might be using for creating Gantt charts. We can go ahead also and baseline our schedules. So we can go ahead and hit baseline, and this is, again, just like MS Project. This will save it as baseline 0 initially. You can put a note, for this, for baseline 0. You don't typically need to, but you certainly can. So, just the initial baseline, and this will get saved off to the database. And this can be used by the PM as well as the portfolio manager later, just to understand if there are multiple baselines, what each one was for, when it was done, what the changes were, etc. So we'll go ahead and just save the baseline here. And there we go, we got our toast. And then the other things we can point out here, so we see all this percent complete here. They're all 0%. So anytime that you actually get something done, you can select that task and go ahead and just mark it complete. It'll change it to 100%, and that will save that to the database as complete so that it can show progress on the project. I'm going to go ahead and just put that back to 0 because I don't want to do that yet. Go ahead and save my changes. And at any point, if you are wanting to do more work on this that's more significant than just adding a few lines or something that maybe requires quite a bit more work, you can always re-export this to MS Project, and it will export just like we did before to an XML file, and you can edit it there and re-upload it. So that's very, very simple to do it that way. Send calendar invites. So some people like to be able to see their tasks in their actual, Outlook or Gmail calendars, whatever email and calendar tool you're using. So you actually can click this Send Calendar Invites button, and what it will do is it will ask you, do you want to send all the tasks? Do you want to send only new tasks? Because it can actually keep track of anything that's new since you previously sent it. You can even resend updated tasks. So if you have just updated things, new durations, new deadlines, things like that, and you only want to send those to the relevant users, you can click that, and it will automatically email a calendar event to those users and just show it on their calendar if you would like to use that functionality. One other thing I'll just show on this page, you can also export to PowerPoint, and this will create just a very simple deck that shows the milestones. It'll show most of the project tasks. Not necessarily something I personally use a whole lot, but I know that everybody has different ways of working, and so if that's valuable to you, that is an option as well. So another fun feature that this Gantt chart has is, let's say that you want to make one of the tasks on this page predecessor, or have a predecessor from another project. You actually can do that by clicking on the task and open up the light box, so double click, and then you just come down here to predecessors and you click cross project links. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose the functional project we created in the last video. I went ahead and just created a few tasks manually for it. So I'm just going to click this, click add to predecessors, save predecessors, and click save my project. And now if I open it back up, we will see that it actually tells us that it's a cross-project predecessor and which task is actually linked to it. And so that is now what is driving the completion of that milestone task on this project. So that's just something fun for you to play with if you have a lot of interdependencies between your projects. Just a useful tool. And again, when we look at one of the later pages, the My Portfolios page, the project manager, the portfolio manager will actually be able to see those links between all the various projects and see kind of how the entire business unit portfolio of projects links up with each other. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and just delete that. So we'll just get rid of that, save predecessors, and click save, and save changes. Now you'll notice that it does not revert the date back to the original date. It just retains the date that was in there. You can always go back in and just put it back to the date that it originally was, and then just save it off if you need to do that, if you have nothing else that is driving that date. Now, if you already have other predecessors, then it will also use those remaining predecessors to continue to drive that date. Also, on predecessors, one other thing you can do is, obviously we can type in the predecessors, but let's say for a very large project, you would rather just go in and select them by scrolling through the list just because of the size of the project. You can actually go ahead and go choose a task, and you could scroll through and you could select it. And then in here you can also define whether you want that finish to start type of linkage, or start to start, finish finish, start finish. If there's any lag from when it starts or finishes to when you want this task to start. So this is that kind of detailed predecessor relationship page if you'd like to use it. All right, close that out. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to run over to our resource allocation page. And this page is going to be initially populated by the data that was put in by the project requester. So when the project gets approved, this becomes the baseline for those resource allocations. And this is what's going to drive your budget and your resource utilization in our analytics for this project, at least initially. Now, if you need to change anything in here, you can always come in and change the dates, change the FTE. If you want to, let's say that the project is going to extend beyond the initial duration, and we need to add an additional allocation beyond that for one of our users. So let's say that it's going to now extend from January 1st to April 30th of 27. But let's say for this next part of the project, instead of 30% FTE, for the next part of the project, they're only needed for 15% of their time. So we can go and just add an allocation there. So what that will do is that now adds a total number of hours in the budget for that test user, and we'll see that on the budget page in just a moment, by adding these two rows. And what it allows you to do is it allows you to set allocations based on a time period. Let's say, particularly for a new product development project, let's say our R&D folks are going to be heavily allocated at the start of the project, but less so as the project progresses into our design transfer and our validations and our launch and things like that. So they may just be needed less and less as we approach the end of the project. So we can add different allocations for different time periods of the project if you'd like to do it that way. Now, as I mentioned before, if I jump back to the project details here, you can actually change the source if you'd like to use the more detailed planning method from the Gantt directly, and do it line by line and task by task and set that allocation. I know that for a very large project, though, that can be very cumbersome. So that's why this option exists, is to use this resource allocation page, just because it gets you pretty close on a week-by-week basis to figuring out what their allocation is. It might vary slightly, but that's something that your organization can decide whether you want to make use of that or not. So as I mentioned on this page, we've got our total number of hours. We now have two different sources from our test user here, both 484 for that first duration and then 103.2 for the second duration. And that'll all be calculated in the total forecasted hours on our budget page. So let's go ahead and jump over there now. So we can see, the right up top here that shows, what source it's pulling from for the labor numbers that we'll edit and populate here in just a second. We're pulling from our resource allocations table, and we can change that in our project details page if we need to do it, line by line in the Gantt if we want. But let's go ahead and edit our labor budget table. So we click Edit Table, and then when I add this test user, you'll notice that it pre-populates the estimated hours. Basically, this is our budget. And that's our budgeted cost, and this is pulled from the user setup, from their cost information, their hourly cost information when they're first set up. And then we've got our forecasted hours, which is our total from our resource allocation page. And then we've got our actual hours and actual cost. But what this does is it shows our variance between, at least for now, the forecasted hours and the estimated hours. And so that's 0. Now, as the team members make use of the timesheets, or if they make use of the timesheets, which I do recommend, the hours in the actual cost, or the actual hours, will be populated, and those will start accruing. And what that will do is that will start subtracting from the forecasted hours, because basically what it's assuming is that as you accrue actual hours, there are that many less forecasted hours remaining in the project. So this variance should stay 0 unless the forecasted hours now exceed the estimated hours, and then that'll get automatically calculated. So we can do this user by user manually if we want. Another option, let me go ahead and just delete these here. If I edit this table, I can go import from Excel, and I can actually do a test budget labor table that I've created. Let me just show that to you real quick just so you see. So it's very similar, just resource name, estimated hours, just like we would have normally. So I will go ahead and import that. So I go import from Excel, test budget, open, upload, and there we are. And so now we can see immediately, against our original estimates that we had put together, what our variances are. So we'll go ahead and click Save. And there's our labor budget table done. And then in our OPEX CAPEX table, we could do the same thing if we've got quite a number of OPEX and CAPEX spend items that we want to just import very quickly. If Excel is easier for you to use, there's very easily to do that as well. I'll just do this manually just to show you. So if we do OPEX, raw materials, and these again are the categories that we previously set up when we were putting the portfolio metadata together in our previous video. So I'll just click raw materials, and the description of this, raw materials for development. Let's say we've got a budgeted cost of $35,000. But we got a quote that says it's actually going to be $37,500. So now we've got a variance, and that calculates automatically. But let's say for whatever reason the quote was wrong, and we are able to save a little bit of money, and our actual cost was $34,500. So now we've got a budget variance of $500. So as with the forecast and actual numbers up in the labor table, these calculate based on the sum total of the forecasted cost and the actual cost. So let's say that the forecasted cost was $38,000, but we've spent, let's call it just $1,000. So then it'd say, okay, well, I'm going to subtract off 1,000, so now our variance is back down to what it should be because it's adding the forecasted and the actual costs. So I'll go ahead and delete that for now, and we'll just save that. And if you have additional line items you want to add, so let's say we've got CapEx, we've got equipment, so new equipment. If I can type for project, and again, let's say our budgeted cost was 15,000. Our forecasted cost is we'll just put it at 15,000 just for now, just so there's no budget variance. So. All right, but we can see it totals up our variances for both tables and makes it very easy, color-coded, green good, red bad, so that we can see what our total budget looks like. And, for your finance team, if you want to, you can actually export this to Excel, and it will populate a full table that you can send over to your finance team if they want to track this some other way, or pull the data into other tables, things that they're doing. So that is an option as well. You can just export this entire thing to Excel if you'd like. All right, let's go ahead and move on to our project risks. So this is a very powerful tool within Providence PPM. Normally you would do a risk register just in Excel or some other tool. Many of the existing PPM platforms that I've personally used don't necessarily have this built in. Some of them do. But we'll go ahead and add a new risk. And as you can see, when you hit new risk, you've got quite a few fields that you can populate here. It's a very robust risk management capture process. So we'll give it the risk a name. So we'll just call this demo risk. And the description, we'll just call it risk of project schedule slippage due to development issues. Something just kind of generic like this. So, but what we can do though is we can go in and for each area say, okay, what's the cause of this risk? What is the potential cause of this? What would cause this slip? So, and again, this is a rich text field, so we can bullet this out. We can bold things. We can do whatever we want. But we'll just kind of bullet this out and say, potential cause 1, potential cause 2, etc. And then we can get into our impacts. So, it's impact 1, impact 2, just so we can be very, very clear that, if this does come to fruition, if this risk does become an issue, this is the actual impact we can expect. These are the actual outcomes we can expect. So now that we've got our impacts, let's go to our RPN calculator. So basically this RPN field here gets calculated based on this impact number and the probability number. So generally I use a 1 to 5 scale, as I mentioned in a previous video, 1 being the least impact or the least likely, and 5 being the highest impact or the most likely. So for this, we'll give it we'll put it high just for demonstration purposes. So we'll say that the impact of this happening is a 5 and the probability of happening is a 4. So that gives us an RPN of 20. And then we can select our risk action method. So what are we going to do? How are we going to address this risk? Are we going to try to avoid the risk? Are we going to do we just have to accept the risk? Can we mitigate it and lessen the impact of this somehow? Can we transfer this risk to a third party? So this just kind of helps you capture, how you're going to take action on the risk. What type of action are you going to take on it? So for this one, I'm just going to put accept, just for the sake of it, just for demo purposes. The owner is, let's say, PPM admin. I'll just assign myself. So our risk contingency tasks, this is what we're going to do if this comes to fruition. If this becomes an issue, here's what we're going to do. So, contingency task 1, contingent task 2, etc. So, whatever we're planning to do if this does become an issue. So just so that we've got our solution ready to go. So we know what we're going to do if this does become an issue. And then finally our triggers field. So how are we going to know that this has become an issue? What are the triggers that we're going to look for to say, okay, this is now an issue. We now have to put our contingency tasks into effect. So trigger 1, trigger 2, trigger 3. And again, as descriptive as you want to make these, and as you can make these, the better. You don't need to fill out every single field on here. They are all best practice fields. I say at a minimum, you're going to want to do your impact and probability, so you get an RPN and figure out who owns it. If you can, try to figure out what your action method is, figure out what your contingency and triggers are. But at the very least, you're going to want to get those RPN and an owner, just so you know who's accountable for tracking this risk and doing something about it if it becomes an issue. And then the final thing we're going to point out here is you can see over on this right-hand side, we can actually connect this risk to tasks within our project. So, which tasks are potentially, or even deliverables are potentially affected by this risk if it becomes an issue. For demonstration purposes, I'm going to just select task 1 and task 2, and then I'm going to click save. All right, and we see that our risk has been added. We see that it's got a status of open. So if I click on it, we can just go in and see everything that was added here when we originally created it. If I click update, we can get back into our editing window and update it if we need to. But I'm going to go ahead and just keep it as it is. So what I can do now is I can see these two risks that I linked. And if I go back to my project schedule, I will see, so task 1 and task 2, so they have a duration of 4 and 5 respectively. But because I have linked them to the project risks, what I can do is I can actually select it and click this Apply Management Reserve to select it. Now, this is not from a textbook perspective how Management Reserve works, but from a tool perspective, I felt that this was a handy way to do this. So what this will do when I click this button is based on this RPN number and the RPN thresholds that we previously set up in our portfolio configuration, this will add a certain amount of duration to these linked tasks to account for the added risk of, to account for this risk being linked to these tasks. So basically, there's a certain amount of risk that we say is associated with these tasks, so we're going to increase the duration to account for that, mostly from a reporting purposes perspective, but it is possible that it ends up taking that full time just because of the level of risk. If we end up completing it early, great. So when I click this button, Apply Management Reserve is selected. We see the little toast here, Management Reserve applied to 1 risks. So now if I go back to my project schedule, we see that task 1 and task 2, the durations have changed to account for that risk. So now that we've seen the project risk management portion and how it can change our durations if we apply that management reserve, jump back here to our project risks page, and we see also now a check mark showing that we have done our application of management reserve. So that's always kind of a visual indicator for which ones you have or have not done, because you can make a choice at any time to apply it. All right, so let's go ahead and go to our action items and issues. So this is just a simple tracker. You can track any new action items here. So just, action item for demo. And the owner, we're just going to put as our test user. And you can actually select multiple owners if you'd like. Going to give it a due date of end of next week. And then you can add, again, another rich text field, whatever notes you'd like to add. So this action item must be dealt with, and we'll click save, and we've added an action item. And then issues, same thing. If a risk ends up becoming an issue, you can add it to this tracker, or if just other issues come up throughout the course of the project, so we can just add them here. So we just issue came up, cause something caused it, and the impact is pretty big impact. All right, so then we're going to, again, select our owners. So we'll go ahead and put our test user again. And then down here, we just have a place to add notes and or the resolution for it. So for the moment, we'll leave it blank because I will fill it out later in some of the other tools I'm going to show in another video. But for now, we're just going to capture it as an issue. So we'll click save. So now we've got our action items and issues that we can just track here as a project manager for our team. And then we'll jump over to the documents. So I touched on this briefly just in another video, but it has two different tabs. So you've got a project documents tab, which is mainly for just kind of housing any project documents. Mainly this is used for archive, things like that. You could use it as a working place. So you just have to make sure that your team is downloading and uploading the file as they change it. But you can create new folders here, and you can structure this however you'd like. So project plan folder. You could create a action item, or a meeting minutes rather, meeting minutes folder. So if you wanted to upload your meeting minutes here, you could upload them there. And all you have to do to upload files is you can either select the files manually by clicking this button, or let's say you wanted to put something into this meeting minutes folder, you can just click and drag them in here, and just like you would any other online repository. So fairly easy to use. And then the project document tracker. So this is nice. A lot of times with big projects, you end up getting a lot of documents that you've got to track that you're either updating or creating or obsoleting or whatever it might be. And you end up making this big spreadsheet, and you've got to track it, kind of in a separate system. Well, here we've integrated it into the program. So we just hit Create Document Tracker, and we can actually import from Excel if we would like. And what you can download a template for it. It'll show you the fields that are needed to fill out in order to be able to upload it. And then you can select your file and upload even from this import screen. So then that just makes it really easy if you've already got a big list of documents that you've previously generated. For now, I'm just going to add it manually. So we'll just call it document number 123456. And the name of the document is just test document. And the change description is, we'll call this as a new document that we've got to create. I'll just set myself as the owner. And we have two different due date columns here. So one is the actual due date of the content. So when do we want this document to be generated? And then when do we need it to be reviewed and approved by? So generally, it'll be up to the team to decide, when content is due based on the project needs. For now, I'm just going to say content is due by the end of next week. And then the review and approval needs to be done, let's call it by the 3rd. And then we can give it a status here to kind of just show, okay, where is this in its life cycle? We'll just put it as not started. And then we can also select our approvers. So, if we know who's going to need to approve this document, we can track that here. So we can just say, okay, Jacob and Miranda are going to need to approve this. And then if there's any notes we want to add, we can just add any notes here. So, test notes. We're going to go ahead and just click save. And there we are. So we've now got our document number, document name, what we're doing to the document, who the owner is, when the content's due, when the review and approval is due, status, approvers, and any notes that we've added. So just a little bit of automation on the page to kind of help show what the risk is for things to get done on time. So if I come in here and I change this to the 24th, you'll see it's highlighted yellow, and that's because it's now within 4 business days of the content due date, and the status is still not started. Now, if I change this to drafting redlining, now we're okay again. Basically, what the automation is there to do is show, hey, is it likely that this is going to get done on time based on what the status of the document is? And based on how close you are to the content due date and the review due date and what the status is, it will highlight yellow or red. When it's actually approved, it will actually change to green as far as the review due date goes. And then once it's released in your system, because there is usually a difference between approved and released depending on the company, if it's actually released in the system, now it'll change to blue, and that's just to show completion. But I'm going to change this back to not started, and I'll change this back to this due date. And we'll just kind of reset this here because we'll look at something to do with this on some of the activities pages here in one of the next videos. So that's the different pages. The last thing I'll say on this document page, we have this QMS integration button. So this is still somewhat in beta. This will, though, allow you to start linking your QMS doc IDs and status and start pulling from your QMS system. So this integration is somewhat working at the moment, but it will be further developed here over the course of the coming months, and then more integrated as time goes on. So feel free to play with it if you'd like. As I said, it is still in beta at the moment, and I'll update this video once this is fully released and give more instruction on how to use this. The last thing I'm just going to show, as I promised at the beginning, is I'm going to jump back to the project schedule. So we're doing this in a waterfall style, but if I go back to the project details and I change this, say, to, I'm going to do hybrid since I've already got some Gantt information in there, just so you can see both. And you have, configuration options here for sprint duration, so it can be a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month. You can do what your story point scale is for those of you who are, well versed in agile methodology. So you've got different types of story point scales here that you can configure. So we'll go ahead and save this, and I'm going to jump back to the schedule now. And we'll now see that we can jump between the Gantt and the board. So what we can do is we can actually add a new sprint, and we'll just call this sprint 1, and it's sprint number 1. And it automatically populates the dates for us since it's a 2-week sprint. And this is a status of planned currently, but we're going to go ahead and set it to active. And we can set what our goal is for this sprint. If we want to put any story point plan velocity in here, that's it's optional. You can, but we'll just say get sprint activities done. Create. So in a hybrid, we can actually add items from our Gantt, and they populate in the backlog. We can populate those in our to-do. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to go to sprint 1, and then I'm going to go click add task, and we'll just add this task here. We'll just call it, sprint 1, task 1, and it's a task type, and we'll just give it a medium priority. We'll give it 2 story points, and we'll go ahead and add it to sprint 1 in the to-do column. I'll just assign it to myself and create task. So now we see that this is in the to-do column here for this sprint. So once this is in here, we can actually treat this just like any other Kanban board. We can just move this over to in progress, or we can move it to review. We can move it to anywhere it needs to be, just to get it where it actually is in its life cycle. So I'll just go ahead and save changes here. So that's really what it is for the hybrid methodology. And the agile methodology, you would only see the board, you wouldn't see the Gantt. But with hybrid, you get to see both. You kind of get the benefits of both. If you want to do some parts of the project, let's say you've got software development, you want to do that part of the project as agile methodology, but you've got other parts of the project where, say, you've got to develop injection molds or something like that just doesn't really fit into an agile methodology very well. That's where you can use your Gantt, use your waterfall methodology. So really just gives you a lot of flexibility to be able to do either method as you're planning your project. I think I'll go ahead and leave it here for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I know this was kind of a long one. Hopefully you found this helpful. In the next video, we'll go through some of the additional functionality on the project detail pages as far as the automation here for these draft charter, the high-level updates, the detailed project updates, the analytics and task tools. And we'll probably start looking at some of the other items in the activities area as well. So thanks again for watching. We'll catch you in the next one.